I never imagined that moving into Pine Crest Estates would turn into a constant battle, but that's exactly what it became, thanks to Deborah Winters, or as the neighbors quietly referred to her behind her back, Karen. As the president of our homeowners association, Deborah ran the neighborhood like it was her personal kingdom. Firm, relentless, and dressed in a cardigan. She was the type of person who seemed to find purpose in micromanaging others, and I had a feeling her obsession with control came from something deeper, maybe even loneliness. My story starts about 3 months after I moved in. I'm a software engineer who works remotely, and after hearing about a few break-ins in surrounding areas, I decided to install a security system. Nothing fancy, just 4 small, black cameras, one at the front door, one watching the driveway, another at the back, and one covering the side yard where I kept some expensive landscaping equipment. The cameras were discreet and matched the trim of my house. I made sure they were angled only at my property, not at any neighbors' homes or public areas, and most importantly, they complied with HOA guidelines. I even submitted the paperwork and received written approval before installation. 2 days after they went up, I was working when I heard a hard, almost angry knock on the door. It was 10 a.m. on a Saturday. I opened it to see Deborah standing there, arms crossed, foot tapping, her face twisted like she'd bitten into something sour. "Good morning, Deborah," I greeted, trying to stay polite, though I had a sinking feeling I knew where this was going. Every conversation with her felt like dealing with a strict IRS agent, with none of the warmth. "It's Mrs. Winters to you," she snapped. "I'm here about the surveillance devices you've installed." The way she said surveillance devices made it sound like I'd mounted military-grade equipment instead of a few home security cameras. "You mean my security cameras?" I said calmly. "They were approved by the HOA committee last month. I have the paperwork, if you'd like to see it." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't care what paperwork you think you have. Those cameras are an invasion of privacy and completely inappropriate for this community. The committee made a mistake, and as president, I'm overruling their decision. You have 48 hours to remove them." I stood there, stunned. "That's not how this works, Deborah. The cameras follow the rules. They only record my property. I have a right to protect my home." She leaned in, her voice low and sharp. "Listen carefully. I've been HOA president for 9 years. People who don't follow my lead tend to find life around here difficult. Remove the cameras, or you'll regret it." With that, she turned and walked away without another word, leaving me standing there, completely blindsided. I immediately emailed the HOA committee, explaining the encounter. 2 members responded, both apologizing and confirming my cameras were approved and within the rules. One mentioned Deborah had recently become overly aggressive about neighborhood security, but told me to ignore her. Easy for them to say. They didn't have her showing up at their front door with threats thinly veiled as warnings. For a few days, things were quiet. I hoped maybe she'd moved on to harass someone about their mailbox color or a slightly crooked lawn ornament. But I was wrong. She was just getting started. I came home from grocery shopping one afternoon to find something that stopped me cold. All 4 of my security cameras had been tampered with. The front door camera had been completely ripped from its mount, left hanging by a few torn wires. The others were coated in thick black spray paint, completely disabled. I was furious. This wasn't a prank or an accident. It was deliberate vandalism. I rushed to check the cloud backups, hoping at least one of the cameras had caught the culprit. To my amazement and quiet satisfaction, the front door camera had recorded everything before it was destroyed. There she was, Deborah Winters, standing on a small stepladder, looking directly into the camera with a smug expression. Then, without hesitation, she grabbed the camera and tore it from the wall. "Got you," I muttered as I downloaded the footage. The other cameras had caught her, too. Her signature floral cardigan and blonde bob were clearly visible in each frame as she approached them with a can of spray paint. One by one, the feeds cut out. The evidence was undeniable. Rather than confronting her in a moment, I decided to handle it properly. First, I called the police and filed a report for vandalism and property damage. I showed the officer the footage. To my surprise, He was more engaged than I expected. "I live in an HOA neighborhood myself," he said. "Dealt with a few power-hungry board members in my time. We'll take care of this professionally. Next, I upgraded my entire security setup. I hired a security company to install higher-quality cameras, this time in concealed locations. I also had a few decoy cameras installed in the original spots to mislead anyone who tried to sabotage them again. On top of that, I added a smart doorbell camera, which was now fairly common in the neighborhood and explicitly allowed under HOA bylaws. The very next day, while I was working, the new doorbell camera showed 2 police officers standing at my front door. And just behind them, looking far less confident than the last time I'd seen her, stood Deborah. I opened the door calmly. "Good afternoon, officers. What can I help you with?" The taller one spoke. "Sir, we're here following up on the vandalism report you filed. We've spoken with Mrs. Winters and are here to resolve the situation." Deborah immediately stepped forward, her voice sharp and defensive. "This is ridiculous. I was conducting an HOA inspection and noticed this unauthorized surveillance equipment. As president, I have the authority to remove violations." The officer turned toward her with a patient but firm expression. "Ma'am, regardless of your role in the HOA, you do not have the legal right to damage or destroy someone's private property. That's considered vandalism, and it's a criminal offense." Deborah's face turned red. "You don't understand how these communities work. Officer, as president," I interjected, pulling out a folder. "You're still bound by the HOA's own bylaws, which clearly state that once an installation has been approved, it cannot be removed without a formal hearing and a full board vote." I handed over the documents. "Here's the written approval, signed by 3 committee members, including the vice president." The officer reviewed the paperwork and nodded. "Mrs. Winters, based on this evidence and the video footage Mr. Mitchell has provided, we're charging you with criminal vandalism and property destruction. The damages exceed $1,000, which qualifies this as a serious offense." Deborah's face went pale. For a moment, I thought she might actually faint. "This is absurd. I was just enforcing the rules. You can't arrest me for doing my job." "We can," the officer said calmly. "We can," the second officer said firmly, stepping forward and pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." As the officer began reading Deborah her rights, her expression shifted rapidly from shock to rage and finally to panic. "You can't do this to me," she snapped. "Do you know who I am in this community? This will ruin my reputation." I couldn't resist. "Maybe you should have thought about that before vandalizing my property on camera. Deborah, Miss Winters." The officers walked her to their patrol car as curious neighbors peeked through curtains and blinds, witnessing the spectacle of the HOA president being led away in handcuffs. Just before they placed her in the back seat, Deborah turned and shot me a look filled with venom. "This isn't over," she hissed. "The board will back me up. You'll see." What she didn't know was that I had already emailed the entire HOA board. I included the footage of her vandalism, the threatening encounter at my door, and a formal complaint. By the time Deborah was released on bail a few hours later, she returned home to find an email waiting for her, an emergency HOA meeting notice. The meeting was scheduled for 2 days later, and for the first time in memory, nearly every homeowner showed up. It was held in the community center, and the energy in the room was electric with curiosity and tension. The vice president opened the meeting, explaining that the board would be addressing a serious breach of conduct by a sitting member. When Deborah attempted to take her usual seat at the head of the table, the VP politely but firmly asked her to sit in the general seating area instead. One by one, the board members expressed their disappointment and frustration. The treasurer even revealed that this wasn't the first complaint about Deborah's aggressive tactics, just the first time someone had proof she couldn't deny. Then came something unexpected. Several homeowners stood to share their own experiences. They spoke of being harassed over garden decorations, threatened for minor infractions, or forced to repaint things multiple times because they didn't meet Deborah's standards. The vice president then announced the board's decision. They had voted unanimously to remove Deborah from her role as HOA president and from the board altogether, effective immediately. And that wasn't all. They would not be providing legal support for her case, and the HOA would be issuing me a formal apology and covering the full cost of replacing my security system using community funds. The room broke into applause. Deborah sat frozen in place, her expression hollow, as if she couldn't fully process what had just happened. When the room quieted again, she stood, her voice barely audible. You can't do this to me," she whispered. "I've given 9 years to this community. I've maintained our property values. I've kept the riffraff out." Her voice grew louder with each sentence until she was nearly yelling. "What you've done," the vice president replied calmly, "is create a hostile, fear-driven environment through intimidation and overreach, culminating in criminal behavior. The decision stands." Deborah's composure finally cracked. "My real estate clients will hear about this. My career is going to be ruined," she cried, confirming what many had long suspected, that her role in the HOA had been more about networking and self-promotion than community service. She looked around the room for support, but saw only blank stares and people deliberately avoiding eye contact. Clutching her designer purse, she turned toward the door. Before leaving, she spun around one last time. "You'll regret this, all of you," she shouted. "This neighborhood will fall apart without me." The door slammed behind her. For a few moments, the room was silent. Then, like a dam breaking, the tension released into waves of laughter, conversations, and a genuine sense of relief. Several neighbors came up to thank me, some even sharing their own Karen stories. For many of us, it was the first time we'd truly connected. And in a strange way, Deborah had accomplished something she never intended. She brought the community together, just not in the way she imagined,